I'm just curious because I feel like that's a like a meta narrative that I invented in my own brain about this music. I don't know if anyone else like hears like train sounds and like car sounds within those.
Hi, it's Jeremy Shatton from An Earful. Welcome back to Discover Music with An Earful. This is monthly listening for March 2024, and you just heard Adam Francis Cuthbert talking about Detroit Densha Seikatsu, the album he made as IR with Daniel Rhode. I have an interview with both of them coming up. You heard a track from that album last month, and this month you get to hear them talk about it. But March was a very busy month, so before we get to that, after the break, we're going to talk about some live concerts. On February 29th, Leap Day, I found myself riding the escalator down below Carnegie Hall to Zenkel Hall, a place I hadn't been since 2019. I was there for an entry in the festival Fall of the Weimar Republic, Dancing on the Precipice. It's presented by the Knights, one of New York's and the country's finest orchestras, led and founded by Colin and Eric Jacobson. They started with Ravel's Le Tombeau de Couperin. Not a huge Ravel fan, but they nailed this performance. I loved watching them play it. Then we got to hear the world premiere of Du Yun's Ears of the Book. This is a concerto for Wu Man's pipa and orchestra. Pipa is a Chinese lute, and Wu Man, her skill and identification with the instrument is both complete and limitless. They really worked together marvelously to make this piece. I hope they record it. It's just fantastic. We also got to hear a deeply committed performance of Kurt Weill's Symphony No. 1, a piece that should be performed more often. The end of the night was a few songs, including Christina Corton's epic expansion of Bob Dylan's When the Ship Comes In. Just a wonderful night, and it got even better when I realized I was given a free drink ticket with my ticket, and I went out, and there was a lot of hubbub, talked to Du Yun, talked to a few other people. It was a really nice way to return to the august confines of Carnegie Hall. More concerts to come when we come back. First concert of March proper took place at the Center for Performance Research out in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. This was the opening night of Talk Ensemble's 11th season, and they started off with a bang. Artifacts, their first ever collective composition. They're all such distinctive musicians, performers, composers, thinkers, that this was something that had to happen, and it was very, very good. Then we got to hear the world premiere of Jesse Cox's Censored Sounds Structural Eraser. This is a major work, 45 minutes long, instrumentally, with texts, with theatrical elements. It really was a knockout and very, very powerful. The texts were based on newspaper reporting from lynchings, and it's very upsetting at times. In my review, I said it's possibly the only true sequel to Strange Fruit, the 1939 song made famous by Billie Holiday. It's a lot more oblique than that song, but the impact is there. I hope many more people get to hear it, see it, and feel it. A week later, I was at Pianos for the New Colossus Festival. It's kind of an under-the-radar festival, but they had dozens of bands at several venues. I just made it to Pianos for 2 bands. it was that kind of a busy day. I didn't really have time to do the whole deal, but I'm so glad I got down there because I got to see Them Airs, formerly of New Haven. They're moving down to Philly, but this is an art, rock, punk, noise band that's just so good, and they're even more fun in concert than I expected. They somehow managed to forge order out of chaos or chaos out of order. It's chaotic, it's fun, but it's expertly done and just on a knife's edge. Opening for them, or the band before them, I don't know how many bands were there before them, was a band called Programique, who I intuited were really into the band Wire, and they confirmed that after the show. But they do a great job with that influence and several others, Gang of Four, things like that, the whole post-punk sound. They really had it down and did a lot of interesting things. I'm looking forward to seeing more from Programique. Next year, I hope to spend more time at the New Colossus Festival, but I'm so glad I got to see Them Airs. When we come back, a couple more concerts. March 16th found me at the Domena Center for Talia Ensemble's 15th anniversary concert, one of several ways we're celebrating this important anniversary. It was a remarkable night with a world premiere, New York premiere, several pieces being revisited. Composers included Hannah Kendall, Suzanne Farron, Wang Lu, Stephen Kazuo Takasugi, and George Apergis. The Takasugi piece was especially remarkable. Two people sitting at a table, one of them speaking, the other one rustling a violin bow over papers. It was really wild and had me on the edge of my seat. The whole evening was fantastic. And one of the things we're doing as part of the 15th anniversary season is trying to get more video up. So hopefully there'll be video of this concert, which I will add to the review, which I posted on Substack when it comes out. That was on the 16th. And then on the 24th, I got out to Union Pool, once again, another place I hadn't been to since 2019. And this was a great concert. It started with a band called The Cradle. It's not familiar with. This is the work of Paco Cathcart, and he's in a number of projects. There's a new thing out under the name Junior Missy that's really cool. Turns out he's an influence on Palm, who broke up last year. I did not know that. But really interesting, passionate, well arranged and played indie rock, if you want to call it that, but there were strong representations of folk, glam. It's a great combination of sounds. Now, the reason we were there that night was for the album release celebration for Frances Chang's Psychedelic Anxiety, one of the best records of the year so far. I love this record. It's so original, and she is a great performer. I'll get videos of both of those up soon, as well as the headliner of the night, which was Foyer Red, band of Mitch Myers, and I've been waiting to see them for a while too. So good. They really are incredible live. You have got to see them. Their music made even more sense to me seeing them live, understanding how they were interacting together, and the way they have the different guitar sounds and the keyboards, clarinet, the flute, the bass, the drums. I mean, they really are just one of the most original bands out there. So that was a night of just incredible music at Union Pool. Once again, I will have reviews and videos of all these things up eventually. Some of them are already there. Those were the concerts I saw in March. There were a lot of releases. We're going to get to a few of them. And then still to come, the interview with Adam Cuthbert and Daniel Rhode when we come back. The expressive nature and versatility of instruments, maybe at one time seen more in the background, has definitely been a feature of 21st century music, including the oboe, as played by Kyle Bruckman on his new album of rivers. Really extraordinary album. The highs, the lows, the dynamics. There's words in the liner notes: pointillistic, multiphonic, slowly bent, sustained pitches. You'll hear all of that. He's got 6 pieces on here, several different composers: Hannah Barnes, Helen Grime, Linda Bouchard, Kyle Bruckman himself, and Christopher Burns. But the piece we're going to hear is the opening track, which is by Jesse Cox. So that meshes nicely with my discussion of the talk ensemble a few minutes ago. His piece is brief, and it is called Atum, or At OUM, or ATM. I'm not really sure. It is AT bracket OU bracket M. Jesse Cox, Kyle Bruckman, right now. Wild stuff from Kyle Bruckman and Jesse Cox on that track, and the whole album is great. Bruckman also plays English horn and uses electronics on some of the tracks. A really rich album of great stuff. Next is something quite different, the new album by Will Liverman. Now, I had reviewed his Dreams of a New Day back in 2021. Beautiful album. One of the things I noted was that he is a masterful baritone with depth and power to spare. One thing I didn't really mention is he's starting to now remind me of the early days of Bryn Tervel, when I realized how important it was for a great singer, especially one who sings recitals, to be a great communicator. And I think Liverman is just that. His new album is easily the equal of the last one, Show Me the Way, with pianist Jonathan King. Huge variety of music on here, including it opens with an arrangement of an Ella Fitzgerald song. So much fun. But the piece we're going to hear is by Sarah Kirkland Snyder. It's called Everything That Ever Was, based on writings of Tracy K. Smith, one of my favorite poets. Her book Life on Mars is one of the best of our young century, and I think it's just fantastic that Snyder worked with those words. He has got Renee Fleming joining him on this track. So give a listen to an excerpt from Everything That Ever Was by Sarah Kirkland Snyder, sung by Will Liverman and Renee Fleming.
Today, whatever it was, seems light.
A trail of cloud rising up like smoke,
And the trees that watch as I ride sway in the breeze, as if all that stirs under the sun is a little tickle of knowledge. The great blind roots will tease through, and push eventually past. Tease through and push eventually past. And push
Wasn't that just lovely? Will Liverman's Show Me the Way is just a wonderful album, illuminating so many different ways voice and piano can work together, texts and tunes. Next, we have something I'm afraid we're going back to the wild stuff. This is a band called Technical Reserve. The name of the album is Cheap Heat. It is the 7th release on the Party Perfect label. TJ Borden on cello, Hunter Brown and Dominic Coles on computers. This is so cool. This stuff is so much fun. And believe it or not, the track you're going to hear, I picked one almost at random. It's all fantastic. It's called Fire in the Hole. Because I'm a Steely Dan fan, I thought it would be fun to use that one. You're going to hear the whole track because the whole thing is only 1 minute and 5 seconds now. Nutty stuff from Technical Reserve on their album Cheap Heat. I remember years ago seeing Switch Ensemble at late lamented Arete Gallery and thinking TJ Borden on cello, what a beast. And here he's in a very different context and I'm loving all of it. Now we come to the interview portion of this month's episode. I had a great talk with Adam Francis Cuthbert and Daniel Rhode. I met Adam years ago. He was working for Cantaloupe Records and Bang on a Can. I'd see him at performances and different events. He always had interesting merch on the merch table, including some from his own label, Slash Sound. And that's how I got to know his work as an electronic composer and producer. He also plays trumpet, really just fantastic composer. And in fact, he and Daniel in that role ended up on the 100 best records of the 2010s for their work with the Grand Valley State University New Music Ensemble and their excellent album Return from 2017. So Adam and I hit it off and just stayed in touch over the years. As you'll hear, he is now living in Detroit. Both he and Dan are out there, and they just put out a fantastic new record, Detroit Densha Seikatsu, which I've mentioned before, and you're going to hear them talk all about it, their creative lives in Detroit and beyond, after the break. I am so excited to have on the podcast today Adam Francis Cuthbert and Daniel Rhode, two fantastic electronic musicians, producers, engineers, as I just said in my intro. But starting with you, Adam, what do you tell people you do when you tell them what you do?
Oh, that's always been a really hard question for me. I am a producer, audio engineer, DJ, first and foremost. Formerly, I was working in the New York contemporary music scene as a record label manager. And I guess I still do that now with our own label, Slash Sound Records. So it's always a long list of things that it is that I do.
How about you, Daniel?
I would say I am an artist, producer, a DJ, and educator. During my day job is I'm a music teacher, but I also like to make a lot of music on the side. Yeah.
Awesome. What do you teach? What grades or level?
I teach pre-K through 5th grade music at a small independent school. I really love it because I'm just so close to that early creativity that exists in early childhood, and it kind of like provides me creative energy for my projects on the side. It's that playfulness that they have with ideas and openness to try new things. I always find it inspirational. Yeah.
That's incredible. And those kids don't have any idea how good they have it.
I love being there, and it's a family.
Now, you're both in Detroit, and did you arrive there at the same time?
About a year apart from each other, I think. When did you get here, Dan?
I got, what was it, a year before the pandemic? Like and it was just, I moved out here for a new job. I have family in the area, but the school that I'm teaching at, University of Liggett School, they were specifically looking for a type of teacher that I was, that kind of emphasizes creativity and teaching kids to compose. And I kind of saw that in the job description, and I was like, ooh, that sounds like a place I'd like to be. And it's kind of near family. And I also was kind of motivated too, because I've been like a longtime techno fan, and it was kind of great to be, I kind of found it interesting to be back where this music, like the birthplace of this music that I have become such a fan of.
So you followed about a year later, Adam, and what was your draw? Unless it was just
It was, I mean, that was, I mean, having my favorite collaborative partner in town was absolutely a non-zero factor. But for something huge like moving cities, it was like, it really came down to COVID. We moved in the end of 2020, and it was kind of after, like, 6 to 9 months of lockdowns. The company I was working for like had all its gigs canceled. My wife was running a restaurant in Chelsea at the time, and it had kind of become reduced to like takeout margaritas. And we were kind of like, how much longer is this going to be? And like we were trying to save up to like buy a pad in Brooklyn, and like we looked at kind of what we had saved at that point, and it's like, okay, we could maybe buy like a 1-room condo in like Coney Island. No closer into the like cultural nucleus than that.
Might as well be in Detroit.
At that point, it was like, okay, like we can't afford anything in this town still. We've been here 10 years. There's always been like, my wife and I have always been kind of like, one of us have been really like hype on New York, while the other one's like, I'm so over this. And like, then like 6 months later, like it kind of flips. And at this point in COVID, it was like, all right, we don't actually know if this is going to be done like next year or like in 5 years. And rent is no longer like it doesn't seem like a very smart thing. So yeah, we talked through a bunch of different cities, and ultimately it was like, okay, do we try to go to like the LA area and try to find another like musical industry nucleus? Or do we just like, we have family in Michigan also. Do we just go back to Michigan, and like under what circumstances would we make Michigan tenable? Well, I've like really only wanted to be as close to downtown Detroit as possible after like coming to love like the city experience. Like I don't really believe in the suburbs anymore. So
yeah,
that really only leaves like a couple of square miles in all of Michigan. So yeah, we went for Detroit.
And it seems to me that you've both found a community, or at least a place where you can do your work that's sustainable, that's rewarding. Is that mostly because of cost of living just kind of easing that kind of stress, or is there a community there that you found? And does that legendary history of electronic music in Detroit and music in general?
For sure.
So I'm just sort of curious about how that's contributed or not.
Well, I felt like it took several years for me to feel like, I mean, I'm in year 3 in Detroit now. Dan's on year 4. It felt like it took a few years before I actually felt like I've identified like communities, like creative and otherwise, like communities that I want to like be a part of and grow with and get to know.
So that's been like an organic process. It's not something where you just saw an ad in the paper and showed up and everything was hunky-dory right from the start.
Right, yeah. I mean, there were a few, I knew a few people in town, but for the most part, it was a very like starting from scratch.
Yeah.
Obviously, like we've been around the block for like other things career-wise, and like I kind of know how to record some music and put a record out, but like, what good is that to do right away if I don't even know anybody in town to like share the music with, or like invite
Mm-hmm.
to do a show or something with. So it was a lot of just back to kind of observing and just trying to go out to places. And
I think one thing that's helped is both of us being in the same place, and the kind of always having a friend to go, hey, let's go check out this show. Let's go work on these things. One of the things we've kind of done over the last couple of years is we've just like set out a night a week for like working on music and studio projects, and kind of trying to find like healthy ways to build in productivity and working on our art
and regularity.
Regularity. Like it's like we had some like great collaborations when I was in DC and Adam was in New York, but like it was like a special thing that happened, but now it's like a weekly thing that's built in, and it's kind of allowed us to work on a lot more and kind of go deeper into some things. And I think after doing all of this whole era in COVID where everything was streaming and you're away from you're everywhere, both of us kind of wanted just to be in a place and being part of a community. And Detroit has been a great place to find people that are interested in techno, electronic music, building their own synthesizers. And there's just like there's just this spirit of Detroit that I just really love to be part of. It's just this constantly rebuilding and trying new things, and that sure has influenced me in this era. So
Yeah, I was there for just a few hours several years ago on a layover on the way to Minneapolis for a college tour. My daughter and I were both we felt some of that spirit, even just walking in the streets a little bit. We went to Third Man Records. We went
Nice.
to the big museum. I can't remember the name of the Detroit Museum of the Arts.
Yeah,
DIA
yeah,
is where
yeah.
they do the arts. Yeah.
Fantastic museum. And we went to a contemporary art museum that was closed, but they had sushi. There was just sort of a feeling of energy that we picked up. Super exciting place. We've ever since then we're like, we got to get back to Detroit.
Come through anytime.
So someday. So when you guys set out to make a record, and you just released, I think this was your first full length, Detroit Densha Seikatsu.
Yeah, first full length right? As our group IR.
And a first full length from either of you in some time, I think, in a year or two. So I'm listening to it, and I was listening to it again today. I was blasting it in the living room. It sounds so good. It's such a seamless work of art, and you guys are both playing essentially the same instruments. I know, Adam, you play the trumpet sometimes, so I don't think there's
none
any
in this record.
You're both playing you're both creating electronic music. So how do you actually collaborate? Where is the decision making and joint? Does somebody bring a sound to the table and then somebody layers something on top of that? I'm just really curious to know how you actually make this.
There was a lot of like figure out what the process is with like two people in the studio room. It's either this room you see behind me or that room you see behind Dan most of the time. We'll get together, and I've remained really inspired by this old YouTube video of the Tech Life crew from Chicago. It was like a 160 BPM like ghetto tech and footwork label featuring DJ Rashad, among many others. But like the YouTube videos of them working collaboratively in the studio is like kind of one person is like sitting in the chair working on a beat or like an element on the MPC or on the computer, and then like maybe one other person is like smoking a joint on the couch, and one other person's like kind of talking through like what the person's doing, and they kind of just rotate. Like they'll each take a turn on the instruments of like, you know, somebody might write out a sketch or like come up with a core sound, and then they'd rotate chairs, and somebody would, you know, edit that in some way. So we sort of joke about that sometimes when we're like tapping into the like producer chair. So like I've got this couch behind me, and we kind of just rotate like that, and we talk through things kind of as it goes. Sometimes one of us will just like cook for 30 minutes, and then you check in every now and again to kind of direct where it's going. It was all much more amorphous before, and I think the tracks, especially what we've done since this record has been out, like the follow-up tracks we've been working on since then, have been a little bit more like, we're a little bit more aware of like what kind of structurally we're going for. We're kind of working towards that.
I think also, since we've both moved back to Detroit, we've kind of gotten way more into synthesis and building out our studios. When I was in the Washington, D.C. area, I just had like a table and it was right next to the laundry room, and I could like, and anytime someone had to go in there, like I would be like, I just didn't have a lot of space for it. And in Detroit, I've kind of got way more into synthesis and building out an instrument and being able to like fluidly compose and perform on that, which I think the synthesizer is a lot more interesting because it's a very hybrid between being a performer and composer at the same time, because you like build this system that interacts with each other and live shape it. I've really enjoyed that. But getting back to this last record, it's kind of been a result too. A couple of years ago, we played on the Long Play Festival, the Bang on a Can Long Play Festival, and we developed a performance for that, and which include commissioning Brendan Randall Myers to do a piece for us, and then for 2 synthesizers. But then we also took some of some charts that we wrote and kind of decided, okay, how would we perform this on synthesizers live? So kind of what kickstarted the process of this album is we toured around that music for a little bit. We improvised with it, performed it, and then we kind of went back into the studio and kind of thought, what did these sounds mean? And then that also kind of was influenced by this trip that we've been planning for a long time, just to go to Japan and experience it. At Japan together and kind of go take a Japan trip. And we kind of realized, oh, these are kind of this is kind of what we were thinking about as we were kind of working on these sounds, and kind of locked everything together for us.
Yeah, the transportation in Japan, just the transit infrastructure and the trains, ended up being a really stark contrast, especially to Detroit, where we got like 12-lane highways going everywhere and no trains at all. It was a very stark shift. It's just a jolt to get back here after that.
And you recorded some sounds from there too.
Yeah, so the record is filled with field recordings from Tokyo and Kyoto mostly, and Detroit. So there's like highway sounds from downtown. There's field samples from an old, kind of a famous ruin of old Detroit. It was an auto body plant that's just kind of sitting there, and you can bring your field recorder and soak up the ambiance, the kind of ghostliness of it. So that ended up becoming kind of like the central thematic push and pull of these two like wildly different ways to get around.
And I think the different places, the different samples from the different places kind of like amplified this dreamlike character that some friends have told us that exists in our music. Like I had one friend tell me like, yeah, I just like want to listen to your album just like on a bus in the dark going on a long trip or whatever. And but kind of having these juxtapositions between Japan and Detroit and all these different places kind of allowed us to just live into this like dreamlike quality that sometimes exists and in our music.
There is like a cinematic, almost narrative thrust to the album, I find, when I listen to it. I feel like I'm being taken somewhere.
Awesome.
Especially like the really energetic, kind of gritty stuff at the beginning, and the big thumping beats. Then you get to the track I had on my podcast, Flail, which is mostly just this. That's kind of like the chill out room of the of the experience. Yeah, I think it's really just masterfully sequenced in that way, and so richly produced. My wife heard it today for the first time, and she immediately connected to that.
Awesome.
Just how rich the sound is, and she was like, "Yeah, it sounds like a story. It's like a cinematic experience in sound."
Did you feel at all that like any of those like especially the driving beats and stuff, did you ever feel like that one sounds like a car, or like the highway, or like that one sounds like the train?
I don't think I separated them out that way. I think they were more just propulsive.
I'm just curious because I feel like that's like a meta narrative that I invented in my own brain about this music. I don't know if anyone else like hears like train sounds and like car sounds within those.
Well, the thing that's so great about it is that it doesn't give into any of those cliches of what, like Kraftwerk did the train sound alone. Okay, we're not going to reinvent that. And then you also think about beat-driven electronic music where it almost just seems like they're phoning in that beat from somewhere else. Like that's what's expected, so we're going to put that on there, and just so everybody knows they're going to get that from it. Whereas your beats seem much more integrated and organic within the compositions. So it's a very different experience for me than listening to, because I admit that often beat-driven electronic music turns me off, just because I feel like it was done so well for so long and people need to move on from it. And I think you guys have found a way to put that propulsion in there. And maybe because it was based on transportation rather than trying to get people to dance, that it just has a much more cool sound to it, to my ears.
I do love it when people dance to it, though.
I can see that happening. My wife said, if I was going to go to a rave, I'd much rather hear this than the stuff they usually play.
Well, I think that brings me to like another interesting. So we like played this at the Long Play Festival, and just this last weekend we played it at the small club in Hamtramck. We had DJ sets kind of in between the live performers, and it was kind of interesting playing it in one of those hybrid space where like people dance. Like this place is for dancing, but we were also like we had times where people were dancing, and then other people they were just kind of in the moment, cinematically experiencing it. It was interesting playing it for a place where people aren't sitting down. So, but I mean, it just kind of amplifies different elements of the music, kind of where you play it.
That was like the album release show. And how did that go?
I think it went great. It exceeded my expectations for turnout, especially after all the small Brooklyn shows that I've played, like to the other bands. You know, you throw a show and 4 people come, and like that's always it's kind of like traumatized me a little bit. So like when there were like 80 to 100 people there,
That's
it was
awesome.
like, wait, this is fun. This doesn't have to be like a heavy experience. This can just be, let's work hard to get the word out, and then everyone brings their friends. But actually, like you mentioned at the top about how, like, you know, the post-COVID world has become like, you know, we've all become more proficient or literate in streaming techniques and like connecting with online or global communities. I've almost felt the opposite since coming to Detroit. Like I felt more inspired to find the IRL things that are happening and really lean into that as a venue to build local community and just like make friends and do things in person. Like, yes, like Twitch is really cool and streaming is really cool, and I'm like actually constantly on Discord, like voice chatting with friends in other states, and we hang out like when we can, like over the course of the year. But like I think especially for music, there's just some juju about in-person music that I wonder if I started to miss a little bit, like focusing too hard on making everything available everywhere on streaming and like putting Spotify and Apple Music type things like first and foremost instead of like the IRL community. So that's been kind of one of my mini revelations since being here too.
Yeah, I mean, get no argument from me. There's nothing better than being in a room with people making music. Being the audience to that is just a privilege and so great. And we all missed it during the time where we couldn't go out. And now, you know, finally I started feeling fully comfortable last year and the year before, just trying to go to as many things as possible, 22 and 23. This year's been a little bit slower just because of other things going on, but I've still seen a few shows, and I think there is something. I put it in my review of seeing Or Best Offer that there's like a circuit that's closed when people are making the music and you're receiving the music. And that circuit, when you think about streaming, that circuit is it's sort of open, like it's there. It's open, but it's not closed. You think about the fact that one of the things that bugs me about what I've heard from artists about a lot of these streaming services is that unless they go the extra mile and say do a pre-save, they get very little information about who is listening to their music. I just did a pre-save the other day for a song, and I noticed it said share your email address with the artist. I was like, fantastic. Please take it, because that email list is gold. You can't have it, you know, held by gatekeepers at these enormous corporations. It's just not a good thing.
Spotify goes to great lengths to keep that information from you.
Yeah. So, but I think if you do the pre-save thing, you can get the email address. I'm not sure the mechanism or if they're like paying Spotify for that or something, but it's definitely something to consider. I think Bandcamp is a bit more transparent.
Bandcamp is very transparent. Yeah, everyone who ever buys a record on Bandcamp, and it's part of the like how the value of giving. Like we gifted download codes to everybody at the show who bought a ticket, and so like usually that ends up with an email capture. You can opt out of the email capture, but it's still an opportunity to connect with somebody who you may actually be able to see again at another show, or like you may be able to get in touch with them to share your next recording or something. Whereas Spotify, like Dan was just sharing an article about how people are finally starting to be like turned off to a critical mass about how impossible it is to find out who is listening to your work, and how that's starting to lose its value.
It's nuts. And then they also don't build community through the listeners either. So I still remember
they don't want you to build community. They want to be your community.
That's the thing. I still remember this. There was an early streaming service called Lala where you could listen, you could also download, and they actually had community where it was like social media built in to the site. I made a friend through that I'm still friends with like 15 years later. Then Apple bought Lala and killed it.
Do you remember when SoundCloud was like, I think you can still leave comments like on the waveforms of other people's music
on SoundCloud? Yes,
yeah, it's changed a lot since like its early days, but yeah, I made a couple of friends on SoundCloud from like commenting on each other's waveforms.
Totally,
it was really kind of a golden age.
You can see who's listening to what on the sidebar of your Spotify, who the people you follow, but you can't like give them kudos for that or say, hey, tell me more. How did you find this? Or there's no way to like turn that feedback around. All you do is you can observe.
I've been thinking about this a lot. So like a couple of years ago, we both did this project with Bill Rhode and the GVSU New Music Ensemble. One of the tracks I wrote got picked up into some playlists and got 500,000 listens. And I like have no idea who was listening to this album. And I've seen very little. I've maybe seen like $20 from this, like 500,000 listens. And I think it's like great that like a lot of people listened, but like so for example, in the last couple of months, I've been doing a lot of posts on Instagram and just little snippets of inspiration and kind of connecting with this. And I've like already connected with some artists in Chicago and like kind of found some people in the Detroit area. Now
Amazing.
Some of those connections have turned into they're coming to play on some shows that we're working. And like those are the community social media tools that are a little bit more interesting to me and a little bit more feel more relevant to where we're at, places we want to be, is where we can get like direct connections with human beings.
All that said, so with this landscape that we're living with now, what are your hopes and dreams for Detroit Densha Seikatsu?
Well, I think Adam should talk about there's a pretty detailed dream that's in the album art. Could you talk a little bit about that?
The Densha Seikatsu like album concept, like the narrative that you talked about was it kind of appeared within the like album conception process, kind of like halfway through. And once it did, it started to like kind of gel a lot of things together. I don't remember if I sent you a copy, but I will if you'd like one. So the record comes in a sleeve. Then this is kind of like a side project I'd been working on for a long time. The album package folds out into a 6-panel folder or a 6-panel poster. And on this side, it's the record, all the album notes, bilingual for Japanese because it's so Japan influenced. This transit design, all these lines and dots, it's kind of like inspired by the Detroit, by the New York subway map. But this is a fantasy map that I made for Detroit, which is based on partially freight lines that exist currently or old street car lines, because actually in 1918 Detroit had actually one of the most world-class streetcar systems in the world, and it all just like piece by piece got dismantled through certain interests in cars. So the other side of it is like a proper MTA style map with all of the lines, and the key of the map notes a bit about which lines are currently in existence, which is very little of this. But I was just showing this to Dan because we were hanging out. He was like, "What are you doing this for?" And I'm like, "I don't know. It's just fun. It helps me cope with like cars only over here. And then like that conversation started becoming like, this is really techno, and this should be part of the project, because we don't have like a narrative heading for these tracks that we're working on, but like this is like fresh in our brains and like in our conversations all the time. And so it kind of became that. And then I ended up sending this map to like a couple of urban development bloggers who posted about this map. And it's kind of like a dime a dozen. There's so many people that make their own like Detroit transit fantasy maps, probably because the city is so ripe for it, because we haven't had a transit system in like 100 years. Even though we also even have a couple of subway stations like built out like below ground under a few of like the huge like Art Deco buildings downtown. We were about to have a subway system, and the veto was missed by the veto override vote failed by one vote. So we did not get a transit system in 1918. So yeah, it was an unfortunate narrow miss, and it's inspired a lot of people like myself to imagine what it might be had that not happened. Or like for me, it was kind of like what would it look like if we started building it like right now.
So it's almost like a trip through a fantasy transit land with almost a Tokyo overlay over Detroit.
Exactly. Yeah, it's I would say it's an optimistic vision of what a future Detroit might be like, or an alternate reality, augmented reality Detroit might be like.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, I just really like trains, and that's the thing I miss the most about New York, to be honest.
We both totally been thinking about how you get from here to there, the way you organize your life, and where you're like your mental state. I mean, kind of I was in the DC area, but I've been kind of commuting on cars for a long time. But like when we went to Japan for like 2 weeks, I found like, whoa, like I can get all the way across the whole country and get anywhere. And it's just, and like walk to all these places. And it was just like, wow, this has more of an effect than I thought. The way I organize my life, and kind of those ideas kind of seeped into the narrative and the album too, from conversations that we've had.
The transit shift for me, like coming to Detroit from New York, was like, I think that was the biggest culture shock for me in a lot of ways. Is like, if I want to go somewhere, it's got to be by car, and like driving is really stressful. Like everybody drives like 90 here, and it's kind of chaos. My commute used to be like, I'll read a book for 30 minutes and then I'm where I need to be. It's like, and like, you know, you don't underestimate the amount of like physical exercise you get just like commuting by the subway too. I found myself, especially when I went to work from home mode, I would just have to like go for a bike ride and pretend I'm biking home from work just to like go somewhere, because like the body will atrophy.
Completely. I mean, I work from home most of the time, and I definitely need to get out for a walk every day.
Yeah.
I feel like a slug. You're probably in the promotional cycle for the album now, playing shows. Hopefully you have some other shows lined up and trying to get the word out. Are you also thinking about your next project, or are you going to do some solo stuff, each of you separately? How's the next months to a year looking?
I think the next creative projects will be a little bit of both. We do have a few more tracks kind of in the pipeline, like similarly to how we generated some of the music on this album. Dan is spearheading a remix album of one of the tracks, and I have a solo project that is quite overdue. In fact, the record artwork is already done and like commissioned and finished, and the music isn't done yet. And I never go in that order. So that'll be a Kuma album.
Nice. And I know, Adam, you're part of a subculture. I can't remember what it's called. Is that more for fun, or does that feed into your creative work in some way?
Oh, you mean the anime cosplay stuff?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I love seeing those pictures online.
I love that crew. Yeah. Shout out to my Discord server full of anime nerds and cosplayers. That's always been kind of an interesting hobby of mine. I love like Japanese comics and animations, and Becky and I would go to New York Comic-Con every year, which is cool. It's like super packed at the Javits Center, and it's like 70% Batman and Spider-Man and stuff, so not exactly kind of my vibe, but it was close enough that we would go and have fun.
I took my kids there once. I was
really
lucky not to lose them.
Yeah. It got so it was like it was just shoulder to shoulder, like the whole Javits Center there. But here in the Midwest, those conventions are a bit more specialized. There's a lot more like anime centric cons. When I left New York, I was kind of like, I maybe didn't realize how burned out I was, and I was like, I'm just gonna like go. I want to have some friends. I want to make some new friends that aren't composers, that can just like, we can just be pals, like, because we have this shared like hobbies and stuff. So I ended up making some friends at the Detroit convention. We eventually started traveling together to like other conventions in the region, and they actually came with us to Japan.
Oh, wow.
Last year. We had a big crew. It was really, really fun. And then eventually I started connecting with events that throw like cosplay anime like raves and parties. And it's like dance remixes of like anime intro theme songs and like game music that was like refixed to like slap on the sound system and
Right,
stuff.
right.
People go crazy. It's so much fun. And that was part of like our long, Dan and I both like worked really hard to develop a craft in DJing, because those are gigs that are, there's more accessible opportunities here than there are for like chamber music stuff. There's really not a lot of that going on in Detroit, but there's a lot of opportunities to DJ, and that was like something that I think we both really wanted to get, like, grind harder when we were on the East Coast. When the demand is elsewhere, you kind of have to meet the demand. So yeah, now like over the last couple of years now, like I go to these cosplay parties, and now I'm like DJing at cosplay parties, and I drop my own stuff in there. Like we've definitely dropped some IR songs in these anime parties, and like I bring the anime songs into like techno sets now too. And it's just kind of become like, it's all looped back into like my weekly, daily creative practice.
Nice.
Which feels very correct. There was maybe a part in my life where I felt like I needed to, like, especially in classical music school, like I had to put all my hobbies away, because if you're not practicing 8 hours a day, then like you're going to fail in this job, as I was told. So to reject all of that and just be like, I'm the person that I am. I like these things also. Here's a creative way to like bring that back into like a musical expressive practice. That feels really fun.
Yeah, I think the 21st century has been pretty good at making that easier for people. I think that's something that's developed over time, where people can bring their varied interests into, when you think about someone like William Bertel, there's that prog rock influence going on. And
definitely.
It totally works. Whereas I think for a long time, everything had to be separate. I know for myself, when I was doing photography, the way I kickstarted it was by looking outside of photography, thinking about, reading Chandler and Dashiell Hammett and letting those scenes emerge in my mind, and then trying to build it in a photograph, rather than just looking at pictures all the time to make other pictures from pictures.
Yeah, it's good to feed the soul with other things.
Exactly.
And it's also like a completely different community too. Like when, like we talk about, like William Bertel's a great example. His work is incredible. And even like Bang on a Can too, like with all the like downtown rock CBGB influence and stuff. That's very like, it's classical music composed by somebody who's really into rock, but it's still being played for like classical music interested audience. Where I feel what's different for me, and maybe more satisfying than what I found in the Bang on a Can sphere, is like mostly I'm playing like at the anime rave. There's musicians there, but mostly they aren't practicing musicians or like composer peers or anything. They're people that are like super hype about these like subculture and like hobbies, and they're really excited, and they're dancing and they're partying hard, and everybody's smiling, and that's really all it needs to be. It's literally just that. There's nothing like more serious about it than that. It's just like a bright spot in what can be a really dreary world right now. It's helped me ask like what is my audience, and like, oh, it doesn't have to be all other composers, the way it sort of felt like in New York a lot of times.
But speaking of feeding your souls, can you tell me one release, 2024 album, single, video, something that you had on repeat that you just can't get enough of, that's really like starting to shape the soundtrack of your year? Could you each give me one of those? Because this is Discover Music with an Earful, and I'd like to discover some music through you guys.
I'm pulling up my Bandcamp right now and taking a look here.
I'll go first then. I'm gonna shout out another local Detroit producer named Black Moonchild. They just did a 6-track EP called the Pisces Tape, and all of it's like a kind of a hybrid of like ghetto tech and acid techno and some house tracks. Just like really, really good. I'm probably going to add all 6 of these tracks to my like DJ rotation. But especially there's one track that's it's a remix of Britney Spears' "Toxic" over like an acid ghetto tech like DJ Rashad acid bit kind of groove, and so it's like going at 160. It's really hyper. It's so infectious. I spun it like 3 times in a row.
So for this, our last release, we released it co on the Detroit Underground record label, and yeah, so it's been awesome collaborating with them and kind of connecting with some of their fans. But another artist that's on there is called Derek Michael, and it's very techno inspired music, but it's very focused kind of on the freeways of Detroit. It's like all of his imagery with it is kind of there, but I've really enjoyed that record. It's called Tunnels by Derek Michael. So
that one rules too.
I will find them, and hopefully I can connect with them and get them on the show as well. Yeah, before we close, so tell me about the rest of your year, like what's coming up, and are there more travels in the future? Are you coming east? Are you going west?
We should talk about the synthesizer music series that we started a few months ago, which is called Patch Notes. We hosted at a beer garden in Midtown Detroit, actually not far from where Third Man Records is, so you may have even like driven past it. Dan, do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, so a lot of gigs in the Detroit area are set up for DJing, and you come with your USB stick and you DJ and you play on the CDJs, and there's a lot of people that are interested in live electronic music, and we kind of wanted to create a place to build community for all the people that wanted to just bring out their synthesizers, and you're baking the music in the moment, and it's what it looks like each week is a little bit different. Like this next one's going to be some people kind of doing some hip hop inspired kind of live electronic music. Sometimes it's a little bit more techno. I'm going to be performing on the next one, doing a live improvisation kind of in the style of my EIS record, Electrical Interaction Systems. But my friend is going to come and loop flute over, and we're going to improvise together and kind of find that. So this is going to be a little bit more down tempo version of Patch Notes, but I just wanted to create a place and build out the community of the people that are going to say, all right, we have these electronic instruments, let's bring them out and let's play, because sometimes it's a little tricky. You have like so much more to set up, and I just wanted to create a place to build out that community, because there is one in Detroit, and it's been awesome to connect with all these performers. So Patch Notes is coming up. Another thing is there's this big event on Memorial Day weekend called Movement, and we're not playing at Movement, but there's just a lot of performances in the area, and we're going to be performing on Detroit Underground's party that they're going to have, and we're going to play in the ambient room, which is going to be pretty, or the chill out room, and which I think we're going to be playing our record live.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy, that would be a really good time of year to visit Detroit if you ever have a Memorial Day weekend available. It started out as the Detroit Electronic Music Festival at the Central Plaza on the river downtown, and ever since then it's become like the phrase techno tourism is actually like a real thing. Like labels from Europe and everywhere come and do their own label showcases. It really sort of activates every club and bar in the city over this long weekend, like with techno, a celebration of techno. So it's like impossible to go to everything.
That sounds incredible. Well, I really love what you guys are doing, and I do hope that you get to bring that music to New York at some point. I don't think I'll be going to Detroit this year, but maybe next year. So, any final thoughts that you have about IR/sound?
You can find our album at iirr.bandcamp.com. You can find Slash Sound, which is our in-house record label, newly incorporated as of this year. We now pay taxes.
Congratulations.
At slashsound.net and on all the social medias.
I'll put all that in the show notes as well. So people can find it. We'll put the album in there.
I can't remember if I mentioned this to you, but the album was mastered by Michael Hammond at Figure 8 Studios in Brooklyn.
Oh, yeah.
Michael's an incredible audio engineer, formerly the label manager for New Amsterdam Records. No Lands, yeah,
was his group. I've been waiting for a No Lands album. I got to see No Lands live.
Yeah, was it at 98A Van Dyke Avenue in Red Hook?
No, it was actually at Baby's All Right.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That was a great show.
Right,
but
yeah.
then every once in a while, I'm like, did he put anything else out?
I'm not sure.
Y'all are keeping him too busy with the mastering
Yeah.
and engineering. Producing.
Yeah, he's become sought after for that skill, rightfully so.
Has he worked on some of Cassie Whelan's stuff or Molly Joyce? I think he's
Molly. He did, Joyce. Yeah. Mike Tierney was Cassie's producer for her last one, who's also brilliant. But yeah, Michael Hammond is our mastering engineer. He did a great job on this album, and yeah, we shouted out Brendan Randall Myers also, who's where to even start with Brendan? He's a math rock, black metal, chamber music, super virtuosic guitarist and dither. He wrote us that one piece on the album, and that's something I think we'd like to do more, commissioned works for synthesizers. It's like we're just prioritizing the techno angle at this moment. So
well, that's exciting to you though. That would be exciting.
It's another part of this modular project.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for taking some time out of your afternoon.
Thanks for chatting with us.
Yeah. This has been great.
Yeah, it's good to reconnect. It's good to see you.
Same here.
We'll hang out IRL, if not this year, certainly in the near future.
Well, I hope you found that interview interesting, illuminating, inspiring, all those good things. We heard music from Detroit Densha Seikatsu, the IR album that came out earlier this year, including the track Literal Train Dreams, and at the end there, Michigan Avenue, This Is All That Exists, which features violinist Todd Reynolds. Wonderful stuff. We also talked about the Pisces tape by Black Moonchild and heard her track Astral Body. Wonderful, really good record. I definitely recommend checking that out. I also recommend Tunnels, which we talked about by Derek Michael. Wasn't able to get it for the show, but you can find it in the playlist, show notes, etc. You'll also find links to Slash Sound in the show notes. And another artist we talked about in the interview was William Brittell, and it just so happens he has a terrific new EP or album out now called Alive in the Electric Snow Dream. Most of it consists of a 7-movement piece with that title. We're going to hear Asphodel Meadows by William Brittell. I think you can hear some of the prog rock influence we were talking about. Just a colorful album from William Bertel. Alive in the Electric Snow Dream also makes me think about great science fiction writers like Neil Stephenson and William Gibson. It's a soundtrack to something, that's for sure. He also has a beautiful rework of Purcell's Dito's Lament on there with Jen Wasner on vocals. A wonderful little collection from Bertel. Next, we're going to hear the latest album from Arushi Jain, whose Under the Lilac Sky made a splash in 2021. This album is called Delight, just a beautiful, lush album of modular synthesis, vocals, drum programming. There's some flute, cello, the great Mizu on there, marimba, classical guitar, saxophone. A really rich album. It's been a go-to morning listen for quite a while now, and I highly recommend it. You're going to hear a little bit of the track Portal to Silver Linings from Arushi Jain. That was just a sample of Delight by Arushi Jain, the track Portal to Silver Linings, like all the tracks on the album, inspired by Raga Bagshri. That is a Indian classical traditional framework that's used for improvisation. She brings her expertise in modular electronics and other sounds and her voice to develop these flights of fancy around that raga. Wonderful, beautiful, great album. Next we have a jazz trio from Sweden. This is Lisa Ullin on piano, Elsa Bergman on bass, and Anna Lund on drums. They use that trio format to the max, cooking up quite a head of steam, and you're going to hear that now on the song Rage by Space from their album Embrace the Space. Intense stuff from space. Embrace the space, they say, and I did, and you should. Next, we have another jazz trio, but a very different lineup. This is Dave Harrington, who plays guitar and electronics, Max Jaffe, drums, percussion, effects, and Patrick Shiroishi, saxophones, bells, and tambourine. These three guys have done so much different music over the years. Harrington is the one I'm most familiar with from his work with Nico Jar in the group they called Dark Side, which frankly was not my favorite Nico Jar project, but Harrington is incredibly talented and skillful playing guitar with the ability to create soundscapes or just like cut in with incendiary lines. He does both on this album. There's 5 tracks. The first 3 are kind of a slow burn, but I'm going to cut to the chase of track 4, Ship Rock, which starts at a very high level of heat. That was Ship Rock from Speak Moment by Dave Harrington, Max Jaffe, and Patrick Shiroishi. It was recorded in 2021, but you'd never know it. It sounds like it just happened right now. Right now, also, Patrick Shiroishi just released a great single. It's like an indie rock epic. Look it up on Spotify. Next, we have an electronic exploration of beautiful and sleek brutality. This is Daniel Lee and Guy Brewer working together as New Corroded, and the album is called Pass Lightly. Let's hear a section of No Ceremony. That was No Ceremony by New Corroded from their debut album Pass Lightly. I remember it came into my inbox and I was doing some work, like a spreadsheet or something, and I just thought, okay, I'll throw this on. And wow, it just kept me going and totally involved me in a way that let me get my work done. But I just knew I was hearing great music. I feel like this whole sequence of tracks that we've just heard is leading up to this next album, an absolute staggering masterpiece by More Mother. More Mother is the nom de guerre of Keme Awaya. She's a professor, a musicologist, a composer, a producer, a vocalist, a writer, just one of the most protean, powerful artists we have in our time. And I feel like if Scott Walker were going to make an album about the British role in the slave trade, he might have done something like what we're going to hear on The Great Bailout, her latest album. More Mothers working with a few collaborators here, but perhaps most indelibly, the great singer Kyle Kidd, who I first heard when I got to see More Mother live last year doing a piece called Six Movements, still yet to be recorded. Maybe it never will be. Maybe it was just meant to happen in that space at that time. But when I heard Kyle Kidd, I noted that her voice seems to contain the entirety of jazz, blues, gospel, and more in its voluminous contours, all emitted with absolute naturalism. You'll hear that on The Great Bailout as she weaves her voice around More Mother's declamatory tones on the track Compensated Emancipation from The Great Bailout.
Why am I here reading this? I paid to be here, blood money out of cotton pants. Made myself a ship out of Andrew Jackson's 100 racist fivers. At any moment, the queen shall be coming around. Coming around, at any moment the queen will be coming around. Coming around, at any moment the queen will be coming around. Coming around the Tilbury docks, coming around Black Boy Hill. Coming around to tell me how whiteness bridges the geographical. How it bridges continental boundaries with handshakes and IOUs. At any moment, the queen shall be coming around.
Now that you've heard it, you probably understand why I mentioned Scott Walker in the intro. This record is challenging, sometimes frightening, abrasive, but it injects history and emotion directly into your heart and your mind. She is dealing with, like I said, the history of Great Britain and Europe in the slave trade, focusing on the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833. According to Pitchfork, this was a perverse form of reparations that compensated former slave owners to the tune of £20 million. Unbelievable. We need people like More Mother to explain these things, to iterate them, to ask the questions around them and make them at the forefront of our minds. She has said on Twitter, she noted that this was not entertainment, but education. I would say it's art. Art takes history and knowledge and facts and puts them into a context that makes you feel them. It is an absolutely incredible work of art, and I think we need to take a break after hearing that. When we come back, 4 expansively talented artists using the art of song and sound to make incredible albums. And I am back. The first of the 4 albums we're going to hear to close out the show is The Beholder. This is the second full length from Claire Dixon. Her first album was one I had missed. In January 2022, she put out Starland. I've since caught up with it. It's beautiful. She creates these very lush, synthesized, artistic sound structures and turns them into songs. The new one is even more song-formed. We're going to hear the title track, The Beholder, with Claire Dixon singing and making all the sounds. That was The Beholder from Claire Dixon's album of the same name. I misspoke. She does have some helpers on the album, including Gray McMurray on guitar on that song. Some people who have played The Beholder for said it reminded them of Björk. I don't think that's unfair. And I think Björk doesn't really give us what Björk used to give us. So if this gives us more of that, it makes me happy. Dixon is a great composer and I think is using song form in a very original way. Next we have Jenny Magana, who records and performs as Magana. She is a bass player in Mitski's band for years, and my daughter said she was wonderful when she got to see Mitski. She was among the few who stayed the course and got tickets to see Mitski on the latest tour. Magana's latest album is called Teeth. She released it on March 25th to coincide with the Worm Moon's peak illumination. That gives you an idea of why she might call her work witchy rock. I call it just very deeply emotional stuff. The song we're going to hear is called Paul, and it's about a friend who died of an overdose. The first verse is so beautiful, I'll just read it out. Turns out all the stars were not enough to hold you to the earth like gravity. In my heart, I know that is not you, lying on the floor like you're asleep. Let's hear a little bit of Paul by Magana. That was Paul by Magana from her album Teeth. Next, we're going to hear an incredible artist who may have been Chicago's best kept secret until this year. I actually heard about her from Chicago's own Josh Terry, writer of the great No Expectations Substack. Get it every Thursday in your inbox. I do. Hannah Francis has been recording since 2017, but her latest album is a breakout. It's called Keeper of the Shepherd. She uses her voice like a jazz singer sometimes, or an art song singer. It's not just folk, it's not just rock, it's all these things blended together. And we're going to hear the opening track, which is called Bronwyn, and it seems to open up into a vast expanse of music.
The brilliance of the day waits for you to wake again, patient in the way I waited for you to love me again. Gone when I lost the song, gone when I sang, gone when I lost the way home where I knew. Land smokes as it burns to hell, release me from this sweltered land.
That was Bronwyn, the opening track from Hannah Francis's extraordinary new album, Keeper of the Shepherd. My daughter and I like to joke about creating other boy genius-like supergroup trios of singer-songwriters, and one that I think would work would be Hannah Francis, Francis Chang, who I mentioned during the live portion at the beginning of the show, and Hannah Prusinski. We could call it Hannah Francis Hannah. I think it would be a hit. But Hannah Prusinski, who records as H. Pruz when they're not in the band Sister, and is also part of the wonderful orbit around the godlike band Florist, partnered up with Felix Walworth, also known as Told Slant, and has an incredible debut solo album, humbly called No Glory. Walworth, who also plays drums in Florist, co-produced along with Rick Spataro, another Florist member, and Johnny Baker plays on it, also from Florist. Adeline Stray plays clarinet, who I've seen with Florist. It's all a wonderful world of glorious folk rock, hypnotic, mesmeric stuff. The song we're going to hear is called Like Mist. It's from deep in the album, and it evokes to me Nick Drake, Van Morrison at his most spiritually inclined. That means a long time ago now, like 1968. So give a listen to Like Mist from No Glory by H. Pruz and let it transport you.
And you know the words to say when they ask us if we're friends or just two strangers feeling something good. And mostly I don't know where this one's gonna go. And I just can't get a read on what this all really means. We have to know.
Wasn't that just beautiful? Like Mist by H. Pruz from their album No Glory. Give it a listen. You will not be disappointed. And we have reached the end of this rather epic episode of Discover Music with an Earful, and I thank you for sticking it out. All the music you heard has been ethically sourced from the artists and labels. Many thanks to them. There will be links to those and everything else discussed in the show notes, which will also include a Spotify playlist featuring most of the tracks. The interstitial tracks are by me, circa 1984 to 86, with Andy Gilchrist on occasional guitar. Thanks as always to the Droplets, Holly Miranda, Am Parsley, and Chris Maxwell for my theme song. And you can find an Earful at Substack, as well as on all the socials, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, a little more on Threads lately, Blue Sky occasionally, but I'm out there, just search an Earful and you'll find it. I hope that you will share, rate, and review this podcast. That's the only way we can continue growing this movement to reveal the finest music of our time. This is Jeremy Shatton for an Earful. This has been the March 2024 episode of Discover Music with an Earful. See you next month.